Hello. Laura, I'm going to make you host. It should have just done it, but it didn't. And I know Christy's a co-host. Um, and I took y'all's waiting room off, so people should just be able to get in. I do know that East and West are still in their region sessions. They were still going. So
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate
you're
it.
welcome.
So it looks like we have three folks other than Christy and I, maybe some others joining. We'll give them a minute since it starts at 4 o'clock.
Dr. Barnett,
Yes,
this is Eric Lippert from Bethel University. I was in your session earlier and I had a question, if you don't mind.
sure, please.
You talked about redesigning the masters, the online, how you do all the modules, and you said you open the dates up from start to finish so that they can complete, sooner if they'd like. Do you not have a discussion board component to those?
So that's a great question. Here's how we think about this. Each week they have an assignment due by Sunday at midnight. And sometimes those discussion boards are built in there. And so while not every component could be done in advance, we do know that some of the work we ask them to do, they can look ahead and get a start on. So, for example, if I've asked them to join an IEP meeting, and here's the notes I want you to take and the reflection I want you to write, or here's an article I want you to read. They could just kind of be stacking some of those assignments so that when they were due, they could turn them in a timely manner and have had some advance work.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
When you think like your students are thinking, you really solve a lot of problems. And we take their feedback frequently. And so, the thing about being a teacher in a school is if you have a fall break or you're home with a sick kid or there's a snow day, like you really want to dig in and work on something. And so we try to think about what it looks like from their point of view.
Sure. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Dr. Maldonado, do you have your question starters pulled up? I'm sure
Yes,
you
I
do.
do.
Okay. I'll ask you to kind of take the lead in those when we get started.
Sure.
I have them too, but I don't think it requires both of us.
Thank you, Lori and Chrissy. Just popped in to make sure you guys are operational.
We're ready to roll.
Rock and roll. Hey, I heard there's been some whispers coming up with instructional leadership. Um, I'm sure you all know too. I don't know. Look at revamping tools, basically.
I'm
Uh,
not sure I do know.
well,
What,
there's,
what's the spill the tea?
they're possibly relooking at tills. I mean, and updating, Tennessee Instructional Literacy Standards. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, like, yeah,
you're
yeah.
like long overdue. That's what my people I know always say.
I'm
So
glad to hear that. So that's interesting.
I don't know all the details of all the things, all I know is like, oh, okay, and
Well, they should also consider updating the team rubric because the TILS was updated and the team rubric was not. And so really the whole thing needs to
yeah.
be revisited.
I
Do you,
also want to know, no, go on.
do you think that they are looking at things more like the PESEL standards, or is it just a refresh?
I have no idea. All I know is I've been, trying to just keep my people updated and those things and try to make sure and you all know that if there's a call, get at the seat at the table, and those kinds of things. And you communicate what other things, you want to, make sure included. I mean, outside of that and hearing that, focus on how do leadership keep, teacher retention, I mean, that's the only other.
Well, one thing we know is that excellent principals run fabulous schools and teachers want to be there.
There you go. There you go. And that's where I always say tip of the hat to you all as a not principal. I used to have good friends that were principal, but then I lost them because I think they just moved into their school. I never saw them again. They had to go to all the events and all the things. No, they're great and dear, but it's an incredible job, an
Yes, it is.
incredible thing. And yeah, so I always want to stick my head in here just to go, what can Tacti do to better elevate, this critically important aspect of our organization? What can we do better to make sure we're elevating the voices of the structural leaderships? Making sure you all feel like we're convening and representing better. I know we always do a call for that. 6 years ago, you probably couldn't see one administrator here. That was a real charge of mine, and I'm so glad to see so many more. But I want to encourage everybody here to, please submit proposals. We need to hear from you. Run for the offices. We need to hear from you, and if you think there's any bottlenecks that TACTI might be having there, please let me know. Apparently, I'm on the board for another 2 more years, so why not tackle that too? No, but I really do. We're better as one, and
No, that's a great message.
I
We appreciate having a seat at this table because you're right. When I first came 6 years
yeah.
ago, I was like, "Why am I here? There's nobody else like me here, and I'm not, I don't have a voice and I don't have a way to learn." And so, kudos to you for
Yeah.
expanding your repertoire.
It's by nowhere where we need to be, and even my own folks at my own shop sometimes try to see that value. So I know if you're feeling it, and I always go, at least come to the fall ones. The fall ones are kind of fun, I mean, these I get, but really that opportunity, not only to talk about the issues and the day-to-day stuff, but a lot of y'all are scholars and researchers too. That opportunity to talk about, hey, how do we share databases? How do we, tell a bigger story and all the things. But I really always want to make sure that I'm always open to hearing and making sure how do we do better, as Tati, and I appreciate y'all being here and sticking out here. And if I could change anything, it'd be the T to a D, and if you've seen some of mine, I've always kind of done that in parentheses, but yes, I get it. 90% is all about that teacher prep, but retention and all those things are about principal prep, and we need you all. And so happy you're here. And I want to know if you're not feeling that, then we need to do better. How can we expand this group? That's what I want to know.
Well, you made my day. I appreciate your being here and that message that you've shared. I know the group that I met with in this job alike last year was
Yeah.
very encouraging for me to see the other people who were doing the same work across the state and to meet some folks and make connections. So, just even having this positioning is great.
Well, and I want to say thank you. And of course, thank you, Chrissy, again. I know that, that even just having a common, facilitator on this for a couple of years helps, to kind of gather the names and the people to, you know, hopefully have that voice, and Although I just came out of an East Tennessee one, we got to make sure we're carving space in those regional ones for leadership issues too, and that reminds me of those things. Although there are so many people on that East Tennessee, we're a lot of EPPs in East Tennessee. That's all I will say. But I don't want to take your job away. I will be quiet now and just
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you. So, Dr. Maldonado, why don't we introduce ourselves and then we will encourage and invite people into this conversation. Would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. I'm Christy Maldonado. I'm at Austin P and Clarksville, Tennessee, and I am the assistant coordinator of the Masters in Ed Leadership program, and I'm also an associate dean for the College of Ed for assessment and accreditation.
Thank you. I'm a co-facilitator. I'm Laura Barnett. I'm also at Austin P in the College of Education. And I'm the graduate coordinator for the Masters in Ed Leadership, the Associate Dean for Partnerships and Recruitment. I would fill in the blanks if you were not in our earlier meeting that Christy and I both come from Clarksville Montgomery County School System where we were teachers and we were assistant principals and we were principals for years and years and years and years. And we came to Austin P almost as a second career to provide the education that principals need to be successful in schools. And so it is our passion and it is our background. Christy's an academic. I'm not. I'm a practitioner, which makes us a good partnership because she's the brains behind all of this. And I just, think about what it's going to look like on the ground. So we shared earlier about our program, and I think maybe if you've been around us, that's all we talk about. So what we would like to do is open up with some starter questions and invite you into a conversation about what's happening in our job alike world.
Yeah, so when I think about the things that we hear about statewide, one is the leadership pipeline and what that looks like. And I think it's very different in my experience, it's very different in rural districts versus larger districts or more urban settings. And so I think when you think about your leadership prep program or just in your community, where do you see gaps in the current pipeline? Um, what are some things that we can do to identify and support aspiring school leaders earlier in their careers? In conversations and with our partner districts, we try to have conversations about how do you identify teacher leaders? How do you identify and sort of mentor people who probably would like to go into administration? How can you do the tap on the shoulder to try and get them thinking about it? Maybe that's not something that they've thought about. And so, what are the gaps? What are barriers that we face? I think one of the things that we can share that we have done, which we were um, lucky to be able to expand quite a bit with some grant money for tuition. And so we pushed into districts just trying to recruit and let them know about the program, and these are some things available, but also to provide some guidance about who might be a good fit, who might be in a space to step into a leadership prep program while they're also working. And then part of our admissions process is having the candidate's current principal fill out a leadership readiness evaluation, rather than just doing a simple recommendation form. And that's been really telling because they're able to identify also maybe areas of growth, areas of things that the candidate might need to work on. A lot of times, what we hear is they're really great teachers, they're really great in the classroom, they need to expand their view to school wide. But I think where we struggle is still getting some of the response from some districts that just don't respond. Even when we were offering free spots for people to go into the program. And so I think that's a little bit baffling.
This is Eric Lookford from Bethel again. I apologize. I've transitioned to home by now, and I've got three little ones. So if we have an interruption, I apologize for that. Um, this has nothing really to do with our program, but it has to do with recruitment. Um, in rural West Tennessee, word on the street is that districts are becoming hesitant about giving that master's level pay raise if it's not in an area that they are currently using. So if they have their master's in instructional leadership, but they are not applying for jobs and don't have that job as an administrator yet, they are not offering them that master's level pay. And so our we're finding that some candidates are being they're just being hesitant about joining until they're really ready to step into that role and to make that move because that incentive is not there.
That's fascinating. We're of course in Middle Tennessee, and I have not heard that, but I'm sure that the school budgets are probably driving that decision.
Yeah, I think there are some districts that already weren't given the pay bump because we had some students last year. I remember reaching out to us like, my district doesn't do a pay bump just for masters. Or no, I know what it was. They didn't do a master's like plus, so they already had a master's maybe in curriculum and instruction, and they weren't getting that extra bump. And for some places, they might have a bump, but it's very minimal. And I only know this because I've been gathering salary schedules from all over the state for the last few weeks, trying to get paperwork ready for the state. And so the difference in salaries, I think, is a huge barrier, really, for leadership pipeline. It it's hard to say. I want to join this Master's in Ed Leadership program because now there's a job open because now you've got this gap and we have the ILLA license for people to step into a leadership position, but I think in best practice, what you would want is to have people that are sort of in the bullpen ready to go. And so that that is a big barrier, I think, that we see with leaders, school leaders trying to get ready, and just trying to pull school leaders into those districts that have, the pretty different pay scale.
And I find it interesting that you mentioned the ILLA because just in recent semesters, we've had more requests from principals that they have they want their person and they want them to go ahead and do that so that they can get that job. So that's becoming more popular as well. Maybe
I
they don't have a great pool of candidates to choose from, and so I don't know what the case is, but
No, one of the things that we've had the luxury of experiencing because our program became an online 1 year accelerated with a grant that funded scholarships is we have reached into a lot of small districts where the barrier was proximity and finances, and people who wanted to be leaders would be great leaders but could not cross those barriers said, I with my principal support I can do a 1 year program. The scholarship means that I'm not in debt over this when I'm already trying to make ends meet. Looking at a possible job with a real increase in the future and the proximity. I don't have to drive to a university a couple of days or more a week or go do summer internships on campus. And so you start breaking down the barriers that you have control over. But something that concerns me is that the state of education suggests that we should not be making getting this degree the barrier, and the financial part of it, the cost of getting a master's degree when you are a teacher and there's only a certain amount of loan money you have access to, and the fact that you're going to have to work for years to pay it back. suggests that if you don't know you're going to go into the principalship pretty clearly and pretty quickly, we've just as universities sort of priced out this opportunity for education and growth.
Yeah. And that actually connects to another discussion starter, which was any policy changes have you been thinking about and how it's going to affect specifically school leader programs? And, this has been on my mind. I was at AACTE last week and sat in on federal policy updates. And as we're learning about the changes to the school loan for graduate programs and the the shift of the education degrees not counting as those professional areas where they have access to a little bit more money and graduate plus loans going away and like all those things. And I just keep thinking about how is that going to impact us in a year or 2 or 3 years down the road, for people being able to access any graduate degrees, and what that's going to look like. And I know part of it's going to depend on how much someone owes for their undergrad. And but Laura and I were just talking about if even if someone has access to money, the limit of what they can borrow in a year under the new guidelines is not enough to pay for tuition for the full program. And so does that mean we need to stretch it back out more than a year? And that just seems like we're taking backward steps.
I think it would be interesting if collectively, and this is just a pipe dream, the universities across the state of Tennessee said we will discount our tuition for education programs, whether it's undergraduate or graduate, because it's a high need field. And we want to make sure that we get the best people out there and not just the people who can afford it. I wish there were some legislation or some oversight, and that's a crazy dream, but I know people who would be excellent teachers, who would be excellent reading specialists and special ed teachers who say, I can't afford a 4-year degree, or I can't afford the add-on of the licensure or the master's degree program. And I know I've expanded this conversation here. But what if in just ed leadership, we said across the state, we're not going to charge more than $12,000 to get a principal licensure. That's our cap. That's what it looks like. We know we're going to get money back from the state every time we graduate somebody. It's more than a break even program. How cool would that be? Okay, well,
Can I throw something out there, Laura?
please,
This is
please.
not necessarily on exactly related to what you're talking about, but just one thing, just from the department side, and specifically from my workflow with partnerships. One of the things I've been in this role for a little over 3 years, and before that, I was an administrator in Knox County for 12 years and a teacher there as well. And um, the partnerships piece of all of this, the relationship piece. I was in your session earlier today. I think, what you and Christy have been able to do at APSU, so much of that is related to those relationships, right? And I think education, I feel very strongly that education is a relationship, a profession of relationships, and connectivity and all those pieces. All that to say, um, in our partnerships kind of workflow with the department, outside of just it being a requirement by policy that has to be done, I really want to explore and possibly offer a time where we come together with exemplars of not only the initial teacher pathways, but also looking at the partnerships within the instructional leadership programs. And just interested in thinking about that. I think just throwing that out there. We don't have anything. It's my dream. So trying to get some momentum of like ideas beyond just would that be helpful? Would that be beneficial? But having David on with Knox County, how do you communicate? What is your organization? What do you do to support initial teacher licensure pathways in that partnership? Having you and Christy on and talking about what that looks like with your partners for IL. So I'm just throwing that out there as a thought, and also just does it connect to anything else that this Job-a-lot group has talked about in the past, or you all see it from your position or your seats at APSU, or David for that matter?
I
Thoughts
was
around
just,
that?
I was just going to throw in, and okay, now this is my fourth one. I should pop into more of these more often, maybe. Um, but I think actually Tacti's in a pretty well position now. To really start forming, maybe these subcommittees. I don't know. I'm just brainstorming. I really have to take the lead from, our current president and president-elect, Robin and Andy to see where they're at. But, I say all this to say that, I was in the directors meeting, I was in the East Tennessee meeting, and so much we need to tell our stories better. We need to discuss things like the report card, annual reports, pathways to become teachers, pathways to become principals, and to really highlight, I think the success stories as well as some of the challenges and how to improve. I think, being trying to be that problem solution. I hear a little bit about the state grants. Hey, that allowed, I think there's some really great stories that really resonate and would resonate with legislators in there. However, as I mentioned, we're an all volunteer board. And we need those working people to help come together and work. And so that's why I dropped the advocacy thing in there. Not so much to give me points on trying to get people to fill it out, but seeing those folks who might be committed and I kind of wrote down everyone's name here really fast because I think we need to be a little bit more intentional in advocacy. Where we have the names in those states, but even people ask about Dan Hill and pamphlets in those states, we're like, yeah, if I had a whole staff behind me, and we don't, and it is going to be those folks that who can find the extra minute, find the extra hour, in addition to your day job and your other job, and your family and all the things, how do we come together to really start putting together some, you know, um, information out there to tell people who we are
Mhm.
and where we are responding and places areas where we can do better. I always feel like we have the partnerships, we know the solutions. Sometimes we got to frame it better.
That's kind of that last comment. Like I feel like if we as a department, and probably I have my K-12 hat on right now when I say these things, which it is what it is, but um, I feel like we as a department can create space for for that platform, right? So not only in a way that shares resources and allows connections to be made across the state, but also it does offer the opportunity to tell the story, right? And so I'm trying to figure out how we can do that from the department
Yeah,
side. So
and I agree. And I always thank the Department of Ed and helping us tell the story and help us share the resource. And I think
yeah,
that's where a lot of movement has happened,
yeah,
between the relationship with the state board, DOE,
yeah.
LEAs, and EPs. They forget in the other alphabets. But, I also feel like it's Tacky's job to tell its story too,
Absolutely.
and I, it's both. It's always both. And, um, so yeah, I say that to say that, I know that folks on this call has been tremendously busy and okay, how do we kind of roll up the sleeves and do just a little bit more, because if we don't tell our story, nobody else will. Nobody tells a story that I just heard from Laura. It was a Christie. I apologize. That rural school that just simply didn't have access to any people, and affordability there. There was some state funding behind that too. But now the person does, and there you go. Um, potential barriers of, I love that idea of building the bench. I mean, I've always thought about that too, that, how are leadership programs, developing teachers and developing future leaders, how is that done? And I know the good ones do there, but how do we break that down? Um, and scale that up possibly. I don't know. I'm
I,
not,
I have
I'm
a,
looking
a couple thoughts to add, and I guess if I've not keyed in on what you're asking in the right way, just forgive me for rambling. But interesting story. So Christy and I have the principal registered apprenticeship program at Austin P, which means we have federally registered apprenticeship. And so through that contract with the federal government, we reached out multiple times to over 140 school districts through emails and phone calls saying, will you send someone for a free master's degree in educational leadership? Just tag somebody like out of your whole big district. Just send us to up to 4 people, up to 8 people, depending on the size of the district. Begged them. Only 54 of 140 something took us up on putting someone. And so let's say that you don't have a principal spot open, because I particularly called one principal. The Ears Foundation pointed me to him and said, like, talk to this guy because I think they need help with leadership. And so I called this particular superintendent and he said, we have 3 schools, we have 3 principals, we don't need anybody else. Well, why would you not build leadership amongst your teachers? Why would you not have instructional coaches and other people in your building with a leadership degree who learn about the running of a school and the capacity to lead other people? Why would you not take advantage of that opportunity? And so you talk about relationships. The places that Christy and I have relationships with superintendents, they invite us, Austin P, like Masters Ed leadership people, to their luncheons and allow us to talk to them and eat with them and learn about their districts and what their needs are. And then, there's this continual back and forth where I could pick up the phone and call any one of them and give them the good news or ask them for help. And so my feeling at Austin P is at least I've got 54 districts where I can say I have a connection. I know somebody's name. We've served them. We've provided for them. But dadgummit, what's going on with the other 90? I take free stuff all the time. So it just doesn't resonate with me.
Yeah, I think capitalizing on that idea of that you want teachers in your district to also be teacher leaders, and it's not always an about administrative position is a huge gap that I see in the way that some districts are approaching like developing their people. Because when you have people who are in teacher positions, but they've stepped up as leaders, it makes your building better. It makes your teaching better. It makes your teacher team better. Many times, those are the people that are really driving a lot of initiatives. Are people that are at the classroom leadership level. Um, and so I think that's huge. And the other thing that I've noticed, and this has been very anecdotal, not anything data-based, but um, when you don't have people that are training and you're developing people to become leaders, then when you have a leader that's in a position that is not performing, that is not effective, that is not doing what they're supposed to do, um, you kind of get that like hands in the air, like I don't really have anybody else. But you could you, you could get someone else. And so I think that is a little bit of a gap that just in that, having relationships with people at the district level.
Mhm.
And I just want to see if others feel similarly. Hey, Tanya, I knew I was going to call on you. Hey,
Hey, hey, it's late on a Friday, but that's all
I
right.
know, I know. Thank you.
But no, I was just thinking as y'all were speaking, we do have to tell our story because nobody's going to tell it. And, so many times, Alicia, I consider you and I instructional leaders,
Hmm.
but, the public thinks of us as principals that just manage a school.
Right.
And so that story needs to be told. But I
Hmm.
will tell you something better, Laura. There was a gentleman that used to be state representative in East Tennessee that was trying to give away $10,000 to a principal that was achieving an ELA in third grade. They're teachers, and he put the money toward the principal because he felt like they were the instructional leader. You would not believe the backlash he received over that. And so he's trying to give it away. He has a $1 million trust set up right now to give this uh, award. It's sustainability forever because if you know anything about finances, he gives away $40,000 a year. It's forever because it doesn't touch the principle of that trust. So we do have a couple of districts in East Tennessee that the superintendents are very receptive to this award for their principals, but we have a lot more that are not, that will not answer the email. So there's a lot of work to be done.
And our feeling was we're going to continue to email you, hopefully catching your eye.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
finally, we called, like picked up the phone, found their phone numbers, and called their offices and said, we would like to give a scholarship to some people in your district.
Hmm.
Funds
Hmm.
couldn't get the call past the secretary or, wouldn't be returned. I'm
Well,
flummoxed.
this gentleman he has Rand McNally working for him now, and he has emailed every single principal in East Tennessee about this. So he does have some, and we're going to a literacy conference next week in Sevierville to talk about our story. So he's over 90 years old, and he is on fire for literacy, but particularly principals. And I told him, I said, it really made me feel good because I said nobody's ever like said, "Oh, the principal is, it's always." And I love teachers, and teachers deserve everything they get, but it is nice to every once in a while be, a lot, so at least say thank you for the
Hmm.
job that instructional leaders do.
Well, it's unless you have been a great principal in a school, it's hard to appreciate that the role of the principal is like being a coach. You have all these players on your team. They have different positions, they have different jobs. You couldn't do it without them. They're the feet on the ground, but it's a coach who's calling the plays and supporting the players and making sure they have food to eat and uniforms to wear and plays and, coaching and feedback when they like, you are part of that team as that coach. And so the better you are, the better they are.
That's Laura. That's exactly. Not that I like Nick Saban, but I do appreciate his coaching and a lot of his quotes. But that's exactly what we use when we were talking to a group of directors. Is he doesn't actually, put his hand on the ball per se, but he directs the quarterback to do it. And so it's the same thing as a principal. They don't, we're not actually, well, sometimes we might give the TCAP if a teacher's sick or something, but, we're not giving the standardized testing, but, we're right there, directing, like you said, making sure everything is in place. I've been blessed with lots of instructional leaders as friends, ones on this call right now,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
just know what kind of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into this. So, hey, I'm on board. Any kind of advocacy we can do and anything we can tell our story, I am on board.
Tanya, I've already highlighted your name as well as Laura. Christy, sorry you've been voluntold. Well, as you all know, Laura and Christy, I don't have to tell you the story of how we're all cousins. I know every street in your neighborhood's Claxton just like us. So, we have the same founding fathers. Philander. And I like to call him Phil. But Tanya, I think those are the things that, I think it's really important to do that. And and to get it right and to tell the stories that are right. Heck, I'm trying to even think of a nice way to tell that story of how principals refuse money because it needs to go to all, not just the one. I mean, talk about a principal. Wow, that I'd work for in a heartbeat. I mean, just amazing. Um, yeah, thank you for sharing all that. But yes, fill out that whole survey so I forget you. If not, I'm gonna cold call you in time. I'll always bug you. But Christy and Laura saying just really appreciate all your efforts on this, and I don't I don't want to filibustered.
No, no, we're passionate about it. And I would direct those of you on the call to look at the research and the publications by Jason Grissom because he has really put his finger on what do great principals do differently in the state of Tennessee? What are the barriers? What happens when you remove an ineffective principal and bring in a new principal who is effective? Where are you 2 years later versus where you would have been? It is really encouraging, I think, to read his work and to see that somebody's paying attention to what we're doing.
Yeah, look at Hattie's research too. He's putting out some new research about instructional leadership, and
Ab-
it's really encouraging.
Absolutely.
And I always want to say that, I don't live in this space as much as you all, but I want to make sure y'all voices are heard. And Jason, I know. I mean, we can get them here, in those things. We can invite folks here. So I always want you to, make sure you're reaching out to us and make sure those things are happening. We may not always be able to get it, but boy, I would love to try to get them there. You know, I'm a teacher and I get it. 90% of this is teacher, 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 but principles matter. And it's important that this organization put those folks up there too and hear those things and hear the good words as well. So I'm going to charge you all with emailing me or emailing Tacky, hey, Dave, let's get Jason here. Let's get somebody here, especially like on our, I mean, they're just down the street, and
Right.
that's a no-brainer. You know what I mean? I mean, we just got to make sure we coordinate ahead of time, but, you know,
Well, having been a teacher and worked with teachers for 18 years as a principal, um, I really see the progression that your best teachers become your best principals and run the best schools. And that's where your instructional fidelity and the outcomes are. That's where your retention of teachers, that's where the recruitment into the profession comes. And so it really starts at the top with that leader in the building. And so Tacti and really everybody ought to be thinking about how do we get the very best leaders in every school in Tennessee. And when I wake up in the morning, I'm not thinking about Austin P. I'm not thinking about um, principal licensure. I'm thinking about students in public schools. And something that burdens me is just the food insecurity. Like I worry over kids who are hungry. And so everything we do is pointed toward those students. It's not my program. It's not whether somebody, gets a job in a certain place. It's how are we going to serve our students across the state?
I was about to say absolutely. You could have said it better, and that's where the focus always is on the Tennessee children, and the only letter I've ever written that got a little publicity was all about that. So, I think we're ready to emphasize how to make that happen. Great teachers.
It goes back to those barriers, and I don't think we can lose that part of the conversation.
No, I've written those. Yeah.
Yeah, if the proximity and the finances and the time are barriers, how do we break those down so that the very and I'll Christy, you help me with the math here. I'm bad with numbers. How many people did we not admit to Austin P to this program this year?
We had about 40, 42, something like that, that we did not admit.
And so that sounds like, gosh, how are you breaking down barriers and not admitting people? Because our application process and what their mentor teachers said about them on the extensive survey we sent, they were not effective teachers in the classroom. They didn't deal well with other people. They were not team players. They didn't take responsibility. So we're vetting to get the right people into those positions. It's not just a pipeline if you want the degree. To turn away 40 people when we could have had their money at a state institution was a difficult decision to make. But my job is to get the right people. And when we have gosh, our attrition rate in our program is only about 5% to 8%. So that's telling me that we pretty much did a good job with that, and they're passing the praxis at a 98% rate. So they have what they need when and we don't do a praxis prep, zero praxis prep. We teach them all year and then they pass it.
And Laura, I think that speaks to you as well. Those high expectations when you were a principal and a teacher have, bled over into your program. And I think that's what I've just started at Carson Newman, but that's something that I'm very thankful. Our Dean Hawkins, has a vision, but even in the instructional leadership program, having those high expectations, and it's not going to be a cakewalk to get into our program, because it's a reflection on our schools. If we send out principals and leaders that are not capable or do not, reflect well, so I think that's wonderful. That's a great thing.
Yeah, sometimes that conversation even comes up when we have people that maybe are admitted and, either don't have the disposition, all the things that they need to be successful. And sometimes we have some integrity issues and things like that. And we don't feel bad that we don't have 100% because sometimes those people don't need to graduate with a degree from Austin P and, go be a school leader somewhere. So, um, it is about reputation and about making sure that we have that quality. Because that's who we want stepping into schools.
Well, I'm not in charge of this. This doesn't have to last an hour. We only want to be here to talk about things that would be of interest to the folks who've joined us. So I would just welcome you if there are any other topics you want to push around or connections you want to make.
I just wanted to thank you both for facilitating and jumping here at the last minute. And I'll be sure to follow up with you all and tying you on the list as always, to really kind of think about, going forward.
You bet.
Mm.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
I guess that's a good night.
That's a
Y'all have a
good
wonderful
Happy
weekend.
Friday.
Lovely
Take
weekend.
care. Thank you.
Thank you all. Let's to be continued.